Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Taiwan Studies Program Book Talk Series. My name is James Lin. I am Assistant Professor of International Studies and Associate Chair of the Taiwan Studies Program. I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Dr. Henry Yeung this afternoon to speak about his recent book. Dr. Yeung is Distinguished Professor at the Department of Geography, National University of Singapore. He received his BA, First Class Honors at National University of Singapore, his PhD in Geography at the University of Manchester. His research interests cover broadly theories and geography of transnational corporations, East Asian firms, and developmental states. If I were to name all of the articles and books that Professor Yeung has published, we would only have about 5 minutes left for his talk, unfortunately. So I will just mention a couple of his more recent books, Strategic Coupling, East Asian Industrial Transformation in the Global Economy, published with Cornell University Press in 2016. Global Production Networks, co-authored with Yeung, published by Oxford University Press in 2015. Today he will be talking about his recently published 2022 book, Interconnected Worlds, Global Electronics and Production Networks in East Asia, published by Stanford University Press. I should also mention tomorrow he'll be giving a talk at the Department of Geography, where he will be presenting on the most recent book. I mean, you're putting this to shame, Henry. Boy, the prolificness of your publishing. This is Theory and Explanation in Geography, which will be tomorrow's talk. So if you're around Smith Hall, 3:30 tomorrow. But yeah, so today's will be on interconnected worlds. So I will hand it over to you, Dr. Yeung, and go ahead with your presentation. Oh, let's also give a warm round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks so much, James, for your very generous introduction. As I wrote explicitly in the preface of that new book, I do sleep in the afternoon, except today. Today we play ping pong, so I'm actually very fresh. We play 45 minutes of table tennis, refreshed. So I do sleep, and I don't work at night, and I actually watch Korean drama. And that's why that book cover is inspired by Squid Games, the three symbols. All right, today I shall talk to you about something empirical. It's not theory. There is a little bit theory part. And also the actual presentation is slightly different from what's advertised, which was on the book. But actually, the actual topic I want to talk about is semiconductors, not just electronics, which is the iPhone, the laptop, and so on and so forth. That's what the whole book was about. Today, I will focus on just semiconductors and chips war, as you can tell, and how geopolitical issues have, of course, seeped into this particular industry, and how I will show you later on this industry is complex and is organized in particular ways known as kind of global production networks or global value chains. And you have to know a bit more about that in order to understand the current contentions and perhaps policy outcomes, perverse or otherwise. You will see what's happening later, all right? So I will first introduce the current geopolitical shift. Of course, living in America, you are most likely pretty aware of it, and say something about the post-pandemic challenges in the current decade. And it will take a while, then followed by understanding some of these key challenges within the semiconductor industry in relation to what I will call the trouble with global production networks. The idea of trouble is taken from Judith Butler's gender trouble conception. We need to take trouble with GPNs in order to understand what's happening and how policies may or may not work. And finally, of course, the last part says something about policy and practice, as well as research agenda for those of you who have an interest in this particular industry. Now, the empirical work was done, funded by my university's global production networks with my colleagues. And we have, because of the lighting, I may not be able to show you fully some of the empirical presentations. This is before the pandemic in 2019 to policymakers. This is a Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank came to Singapore, and we spoke to many of the fund managers. As I think James has introduced, the work is also based on some of the earlier published books. So the 2015 book was, if you like, the theory of global production networks. 2016 with Peter Katzenstein's Cornell Studies in Political Economy was, if you like, the application of GPN thinking, global production networks, to what's called the developmental state debate on industrial transformation in Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore. These are the three developmental states we know of. If you have interest in that kind of debate, go to the 2016 book. Today's presentation has some material from the Interconnected Worlds book, which fortunately won the a silver medal, and most recently the International Studies Association Asia Pacific Distinguished Book Award, I think last month in the San Francisco conference, which I couldn't make myself. And on this chapter 4 of the latest Global Value Chain Development Report 2023, launched in November 23, there is chapter 4 on semiconductors. I'm the lead author of that chapter, published by World Trade Organization. So you can download the whole GVC report in the WTO website. Some of the debates of this whole idea of localization, reshoring, regionalization of production was also debated at a conference last year, this time, May 2023. I was at the Heshka-Olin. If you do economics, you certainly would know the HO model of international trade at Stockholm School of Economics. I was with, it was meant to bring policymakers and academics together. So my job was to talk about trade and geography together with Mark Medlitz from Harvard, who has a Medlitz model on international trade, talk about specialization, and Penny Gilbert, who was the former chief economist of World Bank, as well as former editor-in-chief of American Economic Review. And we spoke to policymakers like Annabelle, who was the Deputy Director General of WTO, as well as Cecilia Malmström, who was the former European Commissioner for Trade and Minister for Trade of Sweden. So as you can tell, this is not a small matter. Many academics, policymakers are extremely concerned with the future of world trade, the way in which trade investment can be organized. Today, I'm showing you one aspect of that in relation to one, of course, highly sensitive industry called semiconductors. Hey, before the pandemic, who would have thought chips would be a big deal, right? Today, big deal, okay? Because we will not only have this, not only have, well, apparently this is coming back again, right? Singapore now having a wave, apparently. My wife was telling me, so I dread going back on Saturday. And so there is this going on, but also this. You don't often, right, have the American president holding that little thing, that chip, that, well, as I said before the virus, most of you don't care about this thing. Well, maybe young people care because of your PC power, for e-gaming purposes. So some of you know we also experience what's called the global chip shortages. If you order an electronics gadget 1 year ago, order your EV, order your car, it will take 6 months, 8 months delay because there was chip shortages, which also, by the way, in turn lead to some of the inflationary pressures you face today. The 10% you get in America, partly is due to chip shortages, which will have knock-on effects on all kinds of other industry. Then, of course, we have wars going on and so on and so forth, that Russian invasion in Ukraine, that lead to all kinds of issues that exacerbate not just the food side, but also some of the key ingredients in the making of chips. Because again, Ukraine and Russia have some elements, earth elements that are necessary for chip production. So the whole point is how to make sense of all of this, how to make sense of the relationship between the kind of crisis of chip shortages and some of the geopolitical shifts. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, and taking trouble with global production network. So before I begin, let me say a few words about the chip shortages starting 2021, almost all the way until now. So automotive chip shortages more or less eased by now. This is about the middle of 2024 already, all right? But memory chips is not an issue, all right? Memory chips until end of last year. Intel CEO is telling you that chip shortages will last until last year, and correctly predicted. If you buy an iPad whatsoever, you get delays. You know, many automotive factories were shut down because you have shortage of specific power chips that makes the car not safe to be rolled out for you to drive. And hence, I'm afraid you have everything except those things. You can't sell the car. And hence, factories will be closed. Workers will have to lose their income, so on and so forth. Of course, you have Joe Biden holding the big wafer, the wafer that you don't eat. If you eat, UW Medicine will be very happy because they got business, all right? This is not edible wafer, okay? Each wafer, 12-inch, has 200 to 300 cores, or you call chips, on them, all right? So you have the CHIPS Act and 52 billion. Yeah? I bet none of you can spell what CHIPS refers to in CHIPS Act. Can you? Creating healthy incentives for semiconductor manufacturing in America. Okay, so this is the CHIPS Spell Out Act. The Europeans are not too slow. they also do the European Chips Act with 43 billion euro, roughly slightly less than 52 billion, quite significant. Everybody want more chips, not this kind of chips, edible ones, all right? So as you can tell, I've given you some flavor of this. It's not a small matter. Many interested parties are involved. You have big nation states getting involved in what we now call industrial policy, which is a bit unusual, so on and so forth. So let me start with the first part to say that part of this is driven by geopolitical tensions. We in political geography has huge, talk about geopolitics. So I'm not going to go into details here. And you guys live in America, you will know some part of this story. So I shall be just brief by saying that there are significant geopolitical tensions at work. We can go into more details later. Second is to say that even if there were no geopolitical tension, just for the sake of argument, all right, say US-China relations are actually in good terms, you will still have technological competition. Some of these shifts in technological regimes will still take place. Why? Because firms want to outdo each other. Chip shortages crisis may still happen, but at the firm level, not because of firm state relations, so on and so forth. So technological competition and market shifts can lead to significant change in the global production networks of the semiconductor industries we know of. The best example is the emergence of AI chips that lead to the tremendous market rise of NVIDIA, which in turn gives TSMC, means Taiwan, semiconductor manufacturing company, lots of more business. So this is something that simply take place independent of geopolitical tension. Yeah. So remember, technological competition is always part of capitalism, as Schumpeter would have told us, creative destruction. Meanwhile, we know there is, since the pandemic, much initiatives in trying to reduce manufacturing dependency on China. Why? Because when you realize, and we were talking about it, you run out of mask. Then you realize everybody, oh, where's the mask made? Oh my God, it's not here, right? When you went to, there was a time supermarkets run out of toilet papers. And you realize you want to figure out the so-called what we call value chain of where your toilet paper is made. So before the pandemic, I have a much harder time of explaining global production network value chain. Today, I just have to say, well, when you run out of toilet paper, you know what I mean. Supply chain problem, all right? And then you realize a lot of it is done in China. There was a time you go into Walmart, something like 75% of the merchandise in Walmart, except the guns, will be made in China, okay? And hence, hey, what's the problem? Wow, the problem is too much. This is even before Trump talked about trade deficit stuff, yeah? So you want to move, you want to reduce or decouple manufacturing in China. Next question is, go where? It has to be made somewhere. Well, could be other parts of East or Southeast Asia, or could be, so Southeast Asia, we get more, I'm from Singapore, so we get more production arising from the kind of China +1 or China +N configuration. But it's not so simple. It's not easy. Even for Apple to move iPhone production 5% out of China will take 3 or more years. India is trying to do more now. Not so simple. There are many parameters, many different sources can tell you why, because you need ecosystem. You need production network shift. Not as easy. And later on, you'll figure out that in semicon, it's even more complicated than that. All right, iPhone is relatively easy. This is a more recent press, South China Morning Post telling you that moving a certain percentage of iPhone to India is already very complicated. Then, of course, you have, again, industrial policies, in this case, the US and Europe, which has been pursued for a bit unexpected past history, right? America is not well known for industrial policy. In fact, we in East Asia always be criticized for state intervention, industrial policy. We should be more like America by opening up, don't do industrial policy, free the market, that kind of discourses, yeah? However, now America is going to industrial policy, at least in this industry, it is explicit, state subsidy of firms. What more can I say? Very explicit, 52 billion. But of course, America is not unique. China has put up 150 big fund over the past 10 years for Made in China initiatives. But my point trying to make to you is that some of these initiatives may not actually be as effective as you think, and so on and so forth. Later on, you'll find out the reason. But here I just have to explain to you, and this is, of course, Joe Biden giving the first $8 billion to Intel. This is in March when he went to the very fab in Chandler that I just went last Wednesday. I couldn't get in though. I'm not a president. So I just want to explain to you that as you can tell, 52 billion is a lot of money because 10% of that to Jackson School will make your program even more wonderful than what you are already. 52 billion is a lot of money. Actually, not a lot of money. Semiconductor is a very capital-intensive industry. Look, TSMC per year invests 30 to 36 billion by itself. Samsung is even more. Samsung invests 36 to 40 billion per year in the past 5 years. Intel is number 3 in terms of money investment, 20 to 26 billion per year. 3 of them together, 90 to 100 billion per year. Either build new fab or refurbish existing fabs. This is capital expenditure. We call this is not a small industry. 52 billion over 5 years. Once you do the math, is not a lot of money. It's a small change in actually this industry. Okay, so I know those of you may say, "Oh no, that's a lot of money," and give to foreign firms like TSMC and Samsung. Crazy, 8 billion given already announced. Sounds crazy, but it's actually a small drop. Okay, not big money. Remember, it's not a lot of money. Okay, very important to let you know this. And that's why right now you have situation of course, Arizona, TSMC is supposed to build the 5 nano, and that was actually agreed with Donald Trump days in 2020. As I wrote in my own 2022 book, is unlikely to be as effective. And true enough, it's delayed, right? So some of these investments, and of course, after Joe Biden's visit, then it invests up to 40, and most recently, even higher, 60 to the 2 nanometer by 2030. 2030, you'll be at the most advanced fab. Now, look at the delay. So TSMC's project in northern Arizona, the first part, 5 nano, is supposed to be already in production as I'm talking now. April, now May 2024, as the original 2020 announcement. But now, as we know, it's going to be next year into actual mass production. And as TSMC is not alone, even Intel's investment in Ohio, 20 billion, originally scheduled for next year, will be delayed for again 1 to 2 years. Samsung in Texas also delayed 1 to 2 years. Depends. Why? Because remember, this is an industry that not only need a lot of capital, later you will find out from the GPM point of view, a lot of ingredients. The ingredients are not easy to put together. All right? Just hold that part. Oh, that's me actually in the TSMC fab. That's what it looks like. Last Wednesday, okay? This is last Wednesday. I went to Phoenix because I needed to visit Arizona State University and then U of Arizona in Tucson. So I drove the car all the way up to there. And that's what it looks like. We can get in. We can park our car and walk around a bit, okay? TSMC front. This is the 5 nano. The 3 nano is at the back, which is still under construction, all right? But it's not in production. Yeah? This is the back of the front. It's still in construction. This, by the way, in the middle of nowhere, okay? So it's nothing surrounding exciting for you to see. Okay, I give you the other side of the story. You say, oh, well, is that normal? It's normal. But if you look at what Samsung is doing in Korea, this is the scale we are talking about in some of the big sites. Of course, Taiwan you will see the same. This is Korea. Samsung is building the gigantic chips fab. And of course, they get Environmental Protection Agency or EPA clearance faster than in America. They get their labor faster than America. They get the engineers faster than America. And that's why they built the fab much faster. And of course, with inverted commas, more cost effective. So you can see subsidy alone may not make it happen as well. So many countries or economies are putting up big funds, including, of course, the US, Europe, but also China. Japan is putting up, not so big, all right? Korea has this Korea Semiconductor Belt Initiative, which of course together with the 2 memory companies, Samsung and SK Hynix, will really sort of push Korea to become even more dominant in memory chips, and so on and so forth. Taiwan puts up some, and so on and so forth. Now, this is the estimate from a company called ASML from the Netherlands that produced that extreme ultraviolet EUV machine that is necessary to make 10 nanometer or below. Yeah, and this is the company that tells you in their report, if everybody is doing what we call technological sovereignty of all the industrial policy, all the subsidy put in, all the new fabs built, the market by 2030 will be 10% more inefficient, meaning overcapacity, meaning everybody may have fabs, but the fabs are not really being utilized in full capacity. This is the company, remember, wanting to sell more machines to the chip makers, and yet it's telling you it's inefficient if you guys keep doing what you're doing. Ironic, right? This is a company that should keep their mouth shut. Oh no, it's good. You guys keep building, buy from me. Yeah. So it's telling you overcapacity, right? I'm explaining all this just to give you some facts to play with. Meanwhile, politically, of course, as you know, the US is trying to build what is called the CHIPS Quad Alliance, bringing together the US, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea. Yeah. And even so, South Korea is telling, again, that it is not entirely willing to join this. And today's Wall Street Journal report exactly says the same. Getting the alliance together, not so simple. Why? Because every national government is trying to protect their own welfare and outcome. South Korea, by joining the Quad, will result in, of course, difficulty operating in China. So it's thinking. TSMC and Taiwan is saying that they cannot accept some of the restrictions in the CHIPS Act because it makes it difficult for them to invest in China or to sell their capabilities. And of course, the TSMC CEO is telling you that geopolitical rivalries are not good, distorting chip markets, as I've just kind of alluded a little bit to you. And of course, Joe Biden more recently asked the Netherlands to again participate in this initiative, partly because the Netherlands through ASML is one of the key sort of technological element of advanced chip making. Without that UV machine, you just can't make 10 nanometer and below chips. All right. Later, I will show you what that 10 or 5 or 3 nano means for those slightly less familiar with this stuff. Now, let me give you one quote. All right. So that's when C.C. Wei and Mark Liu, who is the chairman, this is the CEO of TSMC, came to Arizona with Joe Biden. And what he said, but the saying was reported when he visited his Tainan fab, the south of Tainan, in December 2022. He said this. He said, everyone wants to build their own semiconductor factories, but is that realistic? If it was that easy, there would be chip making plants everywhere in the world already. Actually, the most advanced fabs are only located in a few places on Earth. Taiwan, South Korea, and USA, Intel. This is Intel. Yeah. Take TSMC itself as an example. Even within our own company, transferring technology we developed from the Taiwanese city of Hsinchu, that used to be the most advanced fab, to our site in Tainan. This is 3 nanometer fab that he opened. Yeah, already mass production. This is by December 2022. Required a lot of hard painstaking work, never mind moving from Hsinchu to the US bracket, Arizona. Yeah? Meaning, it's not easy to move technologies because it's not like a CD-ROM or whatever. It's not so simple. It's embodied in the brains of the engineers, in this case, the Taiwanese ones who know how to operate the very sophisticated machines, and you need that. TSMC's core assets are actually a few hundred people. That's it. The machine you can buy. Sorry, not all can buy. China not allowed to buy, okay? But even if you have the machine, you don't have the people, you can't operate to the exact precision. 3 nanometer, okay, 1 nanometer is your hair divided 1 millionth times. Bring out your one, mine is white hair, okay? Coming has too little, okay? Hair. When I pull one, you cut 1 millionth. It's 1 nano. That's the gap between 2 transistors. My thumbnail has 30 billion transistors, 30 billion. The distance is 3 nanometer currently between the two. In order to pack so many transistors, each transistor is a 0101 calculation. That's how you do billions of calculations per second. Yeah, that's what the nanometer means. Okay. Of course, Hsinchu to Tainan, those of us who have taken the high-speed rail will know it's only about half an hour. Easy. Yeah, the guy in Hsinchu is willing to go to Tainan fab to get the thing sorted out, go back to sleep. Hey, but move the guy to the place I just went, not so simple, all right? Not so easy. That's what C.C. Wei is telling you. And mind you, this is December, long time ago, 2022, 3 nanometer full production. 3 nanometer America not up yet. It's going to be 2027 because the 5 nano is next year. 2027 is 3 nano. By then, 3 nano is called old technology because in Tainan, already 4 years earlier. So as we are talking about big investment, big state subsidy, and so on and so forth, the market actually went down last year. All right. So even TSMC had dropped in revenue last year. 2023 is a bad year, about -13 in semiconductor industry as a whole. Memory chip guys, Samsung, Micron suffer even more. All right. Samsung has to cut memory chips. Why? Because you guys are not buying PCs and smartphones, right? How many of you bought a new PC or smartphone in the past 12 months? Raise your hand. New one. Huh? Yeah. See? The rest, not being paid enough, is it? Or should I speak to your president? You need more income. You know, buy more, because half of the world's chips go into smartphones and PCs, roughly. That one is in my Stanford book, all right? Because I have very detailed data. About half of the chips go into smartphones and PCs, and of course, the other half, about 1/3, go into servers, AI or otherwise, and then the remaining of that half, 2/3, go into anything. All right, including your kids' moving dog. The moving dog has chips in it, okay? And vehicle, of course. So the entire industry last year suffered minus. This is by prediction. And by company, most companies have negative revenue last year, all right? With a few exceptions. Generally speaking, 2023 was not a good year. But you can understand when we are talking about big push, build more, the industry was suffering. This is a very cyclical industry. And this is the latest one, which shows you that despite the CHIPS Act, which started 2022, you will see that actually China has been buying even more, both chips, 44% of all the chip making tools post-CHIPS Act was bought by China. All right, so it means in theory, more CHIPS Act should lead to China buying less, ability to make chips less, but actually they get more. TSMC is declining investment in chips, making tools, even though it's still spending big money, but it's proportional because China is spending big, buying the machines that allow it to make the chips. Korea, steady, and then EU, flat, Japan, flat, US, slightly also on the decline. All right, so despite the act, actually is not increasing spending in equipment. This is a tool. And if you look at the CHIPS Act, again, in terms of these are the companies that actually make the equipment. By the way, the US dominates. You will see data later, all right? KLA, Silicon Valley based. This is ASML is from Europe. Tokyo Electronics from Japan. Lam Research is also Silicon Valley, and Applied Material. These are the three dominant US firms. US basically dominates about 42% of the chips making tools market. US is very big player, okay? And yet, if you look at spending, 2021, 22, 23, kind of went up, but then also came down after the CHIPS Act announced. The total spending, partly to do with the industry's chip sale, reduced, right? Remember, minus 13%. So I'm explaining all this just to give you a feel that this is industry which is not easy to play with, because it has its own kind of dynamic, subject to a different kind of demand and supply, all right? So I hope I've given you some empirical materials to digest. Now let me bring you back to some kind of theory, all right? Some kind of theory whereby we need to understand, unpack the complexity of this industry in order to understand perhaps what can be done or what might not be done, all right? And that is what I will call the trouble with global production networks. I have a paper on this in Environment Planning A, if you're interested. Now, this idea of global production networks, global value chain research, most of you might have heard of the term, has been around for about, up by today, almost 30 years, all right? Associated with early development studies, economic sociology, so later on, international political economy. Today, of course, geography is very big, as well as certain kind of political science, IPE, as well as technology studies, and more recently in business school. Management and international business studies. So it's a very large literature. If you're interested, we have written a review paper in 2020, looking at global value chain, the interdisciplinary research. So if you're interested, take a look at that paper I wrote with two of my business school friends. And it's only 500 times cited today. So feel free to read it to get a view. And of course, the international organizations are into this, right? From World Bank, IMF, WTO, of course, and so on. And WTO produces the Global Value Chain Development Report. The latest one is November last year. We went to Beijing to launch it, and so on and so forth. Now, the literature has two big strands: global value chain and global production networks. Global value chain studies are meant to tell you how value chains are governed. The way it's governed will have huge impact on the players in the chain. So the original study was actually studying you guys, American consumers, through your big retailers, the JCPenney, control East Asian manufacturers. So that's really Gary Giraffe working with Gary Hamilton here, sociology, that produced in 1994 the original papers, chapters actually. World system theory, those of you who do sociology will know this, all right? And how, the core is linked to the periphery. Yeah, periphery make the goods, the core consumes the goods, and hence controls, or if you like, govern the value chain. Yeah, and in Hong Kong's case, it played the role as an intermediary. So the Li and Fung in Hong Kong is one part of that early value chain, helping JCPenney to acquire the clothes you buy, or the polo, okay, if you're interested in this stuff. Yeah? So it has governance structures to be studied, and the result, it means that who gets plugged into the value chain may get upgrading possibility. Yeah, industrial upgrading, as well as social upgrading if employment, work conditions get better. It varies by industry. That's how the literature started. And in more recent years, it goes into how power relations are scattered. These are mostly published in journals like Review of International Political Economy. In geography, we have a related perspective that built on GVC called Global Production Networks, associated with a gang of people in economic geography, whereby we study, of course, because we are geographers, how some of these activities are embedded in specific places. So there are geographical/locational differences in how value chain is governed, and of course, implications for different people in different parts or places of the world. And in the strategic coupling book, as I've explained to you very briefly earlier, it helps us to understand how, despite the developmental state, say in Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore, domestic firms have broken out of state control and hence embed coupled with global production network. TSMC is the classic example. TSMC, of course, was 60% owned by Development Fund of Executive Yuan to begin with, 40% owned by Philips, by the way, at the beginning. And get Philips lousy technology transfer, okay? Philips didn't give the best technology to Maurice Chang, all right? Zhang Zhongmo get the not so good technology and then built on it and then did well today. So, and yet TSMC's success is not just because of, if you like, the Executive Yuan's investment or E3, Industrial Technology Research Institute technology transfer efforts, but also because TSMC was making chips for American chip design firms. And that is because TSMC was able to plug into what's called the fabless revolution. Fabless means chip firms that go design firms, but without factories. And again, Apple is the best example. I will come back to this later. And we look at then how, if you like, the developmental state is becoming less effective. And that's the kind of literature that some of you might be interested. In the original theory of Gary Giraffe, John Humphrey, and Tim Sturgeon in 2005, published in Review of International Political Economy, The Governance of Global Value Chain, they came up with 3 other models of value chain governance beyond market mechanism, market and hierarchy. Yeah, since lunch we talked about Stephen Jung, and market and hierarchy would be what? Oliver Williamson, who got Nobel Prize for this. Yeah, market means buy. Hierarchy means do it yourself, completely internalized. Yeah? And hence what they said is that no, in certain industry, you can actually have modular production system. Yeah, things can be modularized and then outsourced. So in that sense, it's a different kind of production compared to market or hierarchy. But it can also be relational in garment, in certain, I don't think Gucci suppliers are just simply a supplier, right? Gucci supplier work closely with Gucci, the designers. TSMC is not your lousy supplier. It works very closely with Apple engineers. Apple is worth 25% of TSMC's business. And TSMC is extremely important to Apple. This thing, all right? Since I'm an Apple guy, so I'm selling Apple to you, yeah? There are also, of course, industries where the lead firm is so powerful, it captures the suppliers, the poor suppliers. They are probably entirely dependent on one customer, and that's called captive relationship. Not good for business. If you're a supplier, you tend to be squeezed like hell, right? So these are the different models that the original paper 2005 talked about, and that's how the literature has gone into an explosive phase since this paper, all right? This paper today is only more than 10,000 times cited, all right? Check it out. More than 10,000 times cited in Google Scholar, all right? My little role is that I was the editor of RIPE, accepting this paper, all right? So, and of course, I know the guys very well. So this Gary Giraffe, John Humphrey, and Tim Sturgeon, this was in the New York SASE, Society for Advancement in Social Economics conference that also published the Socioeconomic Review, that journal. And of course, we have a whole gang that goes to SASE conferences, Amsterdam, when we first get back to travel with, Tim Sturgeon, Gary Giraffe, and others, all right? And the next SASE conference in Limerick next month, right? So if you're interested in global value chain, global production networks, go to SASE conference, all right? You will get the gang. There are others who do environmental governance, environmental issues, and labor issues, gender issues, so on and so forth, associated with a global value chain. Now, the GPM theory we have developed, Neil and I, in 2015, was really to kind of add to this, build on this foundation to understand how different competitive dynamics from cost to market to finance and risk shape different kind of firms, which in turn shape how they strategize about their production networks by either internalized production intra-firm or externalized through inter-firm relationships, means outsourcing. So the kind of buy-sell relationship will vary depending on how the competitive dynamics work out on different firms. Give you a simple example. Apple makes nothing, all outsourced, right? Design and market, and squeeze our money, and hence very profitable. #1 market capitalization in the US. Makes nothing. But Samsung, the exact competitor in the smartphone business, #1 and 2, makes most of the things by itself. All Samsung phones are assembled by Samsung, not by Foxconn, if you get what I mean. Laptop, same. If you have, say, Dell is 100% outsourced to Taiwanese manufacturers. But if you are looking at Lenovo, which is China, bought over IBM notebook, and it's about maybe 65% in-house production. So it's kind of highly varied. You can't say electronics is all outsourced. Doesn't work like that. Same goes to semicon, you will find out later, all right? In geography, we are interested in this ultimate dependent variable, what comes out in different regions and localities, yeah? But of course, depending on your disciplinary training, you may not be interested in the locational geographical outcome of some of these activities. So I've given you a quick run of the theory. Let me give you some sort of connection back to the story I've been talking about. This is just taken from my paper, whereby I try to show how what's happening in Silicon Valley will be connected to what's happening in, say, Taipei City or Hsinchu, Taichung in this case. Taichung, yeah. Huh? Why? Because it's a Hewlett Packard, HP. HP headquarters is in Palo Alto next to Stanford, but it has operations either by itself or with its key partners in Taiwan. So you cannot understand what's happening here without understanding here, and vice versa. Today's Silicon Valley is not just self-contained, it's entirely dependent or interconnected, I should say, with other parts of the world. Huh? And semicon is just one manifestation of that. Okay, so let me go into a bit more technical detail. And this is not engineering class, but at least give you some idea how chips are made. Okay, first, remember the manufacturing. Okay, rephrase. Let me talk about the firms first. There are primarily two ways of organizing semiconductor global production networks. One, you are a chip design firm, but you have no factory. We call you fabless, fab for fabrication. So if you're good in design, but you just don't want to put up billions of dollars into the kitchen, we call the kitchen, making the food, then you just set up your restaurant, sell to your good client. It can be 3 Michelin star, but you don't cook your food. You let TSMC cook the food, if you get what I mean. That's we call fabless. So you have Apple, you have AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, you have today's NVIDIA, you have Qualcomm, Broadcom. Hey, does this sound familiar? These are all American, isn't it? Yeah, all Silicon Valley based, by the way. So American in semicon, very dominant. Don't be surprised. Actually, America is very powerful in semicon industry. In the fabless world, the top 10 firm, only one is from outside America, known as Taiwan Studies, MediaTek. What's so surprising? MediaTek is doing well, but it's only one out of top 10. Can you imagine this? It's so dominant by the US. Huh? The other way, is that you not only design the menu, Mr. Chef or Miss Chef, you also cook your own food, meaning you own the factory that makes the chips. Who is the best example? Intel. From day one, 1968, when I was born, Intel was formed. The company name was Intelligence Electronics, shortened to Intel. Yeah, Intel's motto has always been, we design, but we also want to make our own chips. Why? Because this is important for our technological development. So Intel has been dominating in the chip making industry all the way until 2017, when TSMC overtook Intel's chip making technologies. Okay, so Intel, Samsung in memory chip, Intel in microprocessor or central processing unit, depending on how you want to classify. And Intel will have its own fabs, which I just went to, the Chandler, the Otilus campuses in south of Phoenix, but also, of course, in Oregon, and of course, in Ireland, in Israel. Intel has fabs. And then these guys, because they don't have kitchens, so they use central kitchen. Central kitchens such as TSMC, number one. Number two currently is Samsung Foundry. Number three is Global Foundries. And then, of course, you have Taiwan UMC, and then some others. These are, relatively speaking, significantly smaller, and also, of course, technologically much less capable. And then, of course, each will then either have their own chip packaging testing services. So after you make that wafer, you still have to cut out the core and then put it onto something, and then have the wire bonding so that you actually see the chip as you know it today. That require a lot of labor-intensive processes. APT activities, assembly, packaging, testing tends to be done because it's more labor-intensive, and very little of that is in America. You only have one company, actually it's Korean in nature, all right, which is in US owned. The rest is dominated, of course, by, say, Taiwan, Advanced ASE, Advanced Semiconductor Engineering. I went to Kaohsiung to interview the CEO of ASE specifically to figure out what are they doing in terms of ASE, outsource packaging services. And then, of course, when the chip is made, you sell to not us to eat, but to the guys who make the equipment, the stuff that require the chips, the PC maker, the smartphone maker, and so on and so forth. So this is just a simple way of showing you the two ways of making chips. But more tricky is the middle part, is that to make chips, you need a lot of stuff. You need EDA, which is a design software, electronic design automation tools. It's like without today's PowerPoint, Microsoft, I can't present well to you this thing. I can talk, but you don't see the graphics. You've got to have PowerPoint, means Microsoft, right? So you need particular tools. You'll find out again, the US is so dominant in the EDA market, means software market, without which you can't design good chips, all right? You also need IP rights, again, dominated by US firms, with the exception of one firm from Britain called ARM. And then you have mask. I know we like masks for our nice skin. This is the mask that is necessary to, okay, so this is the nugget that you cut, slice out, and then this is the software, and this is the mask. The mask is to make the design, the billions of chip, the circuitry, and to kind of design, to kind of put it as the masterpiece, so that the light will shine through into the small little core. That is what is called the lithography. This, remember, it's just like photocopy. Chip making is just like photocopy, all right, using lots of chemicals to wash up the different layers to bake it so that you have the gap, which is the gap between the two. In the simplest possible way, chip making, but there are lots of online video you can watch, the specific. That's what inside a chip factory look like, all bunny suits. And then, of course, very, very complicated machines like this one. This is the ASML EUV machine. It is not very expensive. It's only 200 million euro, only, all right? Without which you can't make 10 nanometer or below, meaning the most advanced chips. And look at the guy, it's only this big, means this whole wall. That's what the machine is about. If you have 200 million euro, you go to ASML today, you say, hey, I'm from the US, I'm not restricted to buy, I can buy, give me the machine, I give you 300 million. They will tell you, go home. Not because you are from Seattle, but because we have already sold out to TSMC, Samsung, and Intel. They have already booked up all our capacity. Because even that machine, you'll be amazed. Even this machine itself has few hundred suppliers. It's a globalized product. The laser technology comes from Cymer, which was formerly US company acquired by ASML. And that's why the US can tell ASML, you cannot sell it to China because that laser technology came from us, US technologies. This particular ultraviolet light is extremely important to shine and to kind of really miniaturize from the mask size to this little on the wafer. Yeah. So all of these are part and parcel of how even the machine itself has its own global production network. The most difficult, not difficult, but the most short component is actually the lens. There is a lens inside this machine, which is bigger than 3 of this table combined. And that lens is made by a company known as, checking your lens, glass. What brand are you using? Come on. If you buy a new pair of glass, what brand you want? Come on, give me a name. Huh? Corning, American, not good enough. Japan, Nikon, not good enough. Come on, when it comes to this stuff, who is better? German. Carl Zeiss. It's a Zeiss lens. And mine is actually Zeiss lens. I'm serious. Oh, you can see the label there? No, you can't. Inside has a gigantic lens, Carl Zeiss lens, polished by many German skilled engineers. That's why Zeiss can only make about 55 to 60 units a year. Meaning there are only 50 to 60 units of this that can be made per year. Already booked up by the 3 companies. You have money, they can't sell you. China want to catch up, you got to polish the lenses that good and accurate. So good, you go to ASML website to see. When you shoot laser from Earth to Moon, this deviation, guess how much? 1 meter. So accurate. Because of course you have to churn out nanometer difference in the chip making. I'm just explaining to you some of this component, and there are Japanese firms that make certain parts of this. Is the whole world is only that single Japanese firm that make that single component. Without that, again, you can't make this machine. You can make a machine that look like this, but it's not the same. The example I'm giving you is that chip making is like a very sophisticated kitchen. You can make, well, as the TSMC executive assistant to the CEO explained to me, and I quoted in my Cornell book, they make chow mein. Chow mein means fried noodle. They also make burgers. They also make Indian food, but they make it extremely well to the specification of the chef. Got it? And why Intel has lost the catching up? Because Intel only make French food, which is the microprocessor. But they don't make for different customers, from a very difficult one known as Apple to Qualcomm to AMD to NVIDIA. And because TSMC make for different customers who are extremely demanding and highly competitive, their engineers work closely with each other to make good use of these machines. Because the machine can go very wrong along the way. Each wafer take 1,000 steps, 2 to 3 months. And that's why the earthquake recently, even though it's one day they recover, that one day all of the wafers are gone. Each one about $20,000 worth. But it's more money in the world, billions, okay? This is how difficult this industry is. You want to do? You can. You're welcome. Good luck to you if you can outcompete them. That's why in this world, currently below 10 nano, there is only TSMC, Intel, and Samsung. Very difficult thing to do. All right? You want to move them? Also very difficult. And I hope I've given you some flavor of this industry, all right? The global production networks, even for just the machine, is already so complicated, let alone the whole thing. In my book, of course, the book is black and white, so you see the color version, all right? And by the way, I paid some money to buy these copyrights. Stanford is very demanding. Every picture must have copyright. Okay. So I make sure I pay money for the images. And so as you can tell, I mean, it's very simply illustrated, chip designed by the fabless guys here, manufactured by TSMC here with all the ingredients coming from Japan and other parts of the world. And then, of course, go into the machine that will be assembled in China and, of course, export to all of us, the consumer, everywhere else. Roughly, that's the idea. All right. I think the Global Value Chain Development Report, I've used the color version on the PDF. So if you want a color version for teaching, you can download the GVC Development Report free, WTO website, and then you go to chapter 4, you will see this exact figure. All right. I won't go into details of this table because I know there are many historians who don't like this kind of numbers, but I'm kidding. I've written this open access paper in Economic Geography, the journal, explaining the geographical shift of chip making to East Asia. 2022. You can just download it. Essentially, the story I'm trying to tell is that because GPN Center, we are very fortunate to be able to acquire data on every single fab. So I have data on the 325 fab, 344 in 2010, and back to 296 fabs in the world. Every fab, I have the technology level, capacity, and so on and so forth. Yeah, to come up with this table to give you a feel that actually China was a small player in 2000. By 2010, South Korea and Taiwan already very dominant, and then US was declining a bit. Actually growing, but it's slower. And then Europe also kind of growing, but again very slow. By 2018, China has caught up further, but only in certain segments. All right, in foundry means like a SMIC kind of thing, a little bit in memory. But China has very little capacity in logic chips. Logic chips is the most advanced ones. All right, the processes, put it in short. Yeah. So if you're interested in more detail, read that paper that explains why there was such a shift in manufacturing in chip making from used to be, of course, Europe and North America. Let me give you the 2020 data. This is 2020. Give you a feel, right? In terms of market share, look, the US is 46% market share. You say, no, but I thought today's chips are also to China to be put into your iPhone, that kind of thing. No, because even that is the case. The chip actually is owned by Apple, even though it's manufactured in Taiwan and then shipped to China, say Zhengzhou, to put by Foxconn into this thing, is technically owned by the US. It's a US product made in Taiwan, and then of course assembled in a product which is in China, but then of course maybe exported out. If you get what I mean, then that's why in the chip industry, we typically say the US is about half of market share, meaning half of the world's chips are owned by US firms, one way or another. Okay, it's not made by, rephrase, it's not made inside the US, okay, but owned by US. In terms of manufacturing, yeah, that's where it is the trouble and sort of worry you, some of you. South Korea is about 21, 22, Taiwan 21, 22, which is, together is already 40-something%. And China is 10, 15, and then US is about 12. Even Singapore, our little city state, we make 10% of the world's wafer, 10%, which is the equivalent of all of Europe's fabs add together, 10% as well. So you can see how dominant East Asia is. But by East Asia, we mean Taiwan, South Korea, China, and of course, Singapore, because we do 10%. We make 20% of the equipment, all right? So it's very significant because Singapore is like the 9-second source, right? Anything goes wrong, we should be safe. In this GVC report, chapter 4, with this table to show you, this is 2021. The US is very dominant in software, 72%, 3 or 4 companies, right? Very dominant, meaning without that, you can't design the chip well, okay? You can, I mean, it's just like, if you guys don't use PowerPoint, you can write your own program, okay, and do your nice visual. It will take you ages. I can just do nothing by just using PowerPoint. You see what I'm saying? PowerPoint, Microsoft, if you get what I mean. Design, very much US dominant, which is the fabless firms, the ones I mentioned. And then equipment, US is 42%, 3 companies, Lam, Applied Material, and the KLA. Wafer fabrication means chip making, yes, not so good, 11%, which is, well, depending on your interpretation, it's not the end of the world, right? And assembly, packaging, testing services, 5%. MCore is US headquartered, but actually owned by Korean capital to begin with. But you don't want much of these activities, isn't it? It's very labor intensive, Do you want to have tens of thousands of employees doing the chip testing? You don't want. It's in developing countries. Europe, next one, okay, China, let's say do China. China software is insignificant, basically. And design, again, very low, means chip design firms. Has, but nowhere near the level of play of US or then even media. I think MediaTek alone is worth more than the whole of China added up already. And then manufacturing, material China has, but it's not huge, all right? The most advanced material tends to be Japan, Germany, Taiwan, all right? And then, of course, the US. Packaging testing, a lot. China has a lot of labor-intensive chip testing services, all right? Because ASE has invested from Taiwan. ASE is the world's biggest, has invested a lot in China, all right? So I hope I've given you enough material to, not to digest, but to at least think about in terms of the complexity of this industry, the difficulty of moving it around. It's very what we call place sticky for all kinds of reasons. I can go into technical detail later, and so on and so forth. Lastly, just a few slides on what can we do about this. One, as you can tell, is that if you want to understand today's complex industries, so the industries are simpler than others, as semicon happens to be a very complex one, you need to open the black box. To open that black box, you have to take a, if you like, global production networks or global value chain approach, in which there are different variables. The four of them I mentioned, there are different costs, pressures. So American firms tend to be less interested in making chips compared to, say, Asian firms, right? So Samsung is willing to build its own fab. But of course, Micron, the US chip maker, is still making its own chips, but relatively driven by US Wall Street pressure, which is every quarter make money. Samsung can use the smartphone business to cross-subsidize the semicon and vice versa. Samsung has only one company, but 3 divisions, not 3 different companies. Semicon, smartphone, and your TV, they are 3 separate but same company, Samsung Electronics. In my book, I've given a lot of detail because I went Samsung to interview many of their top senior executives. Yeah? And then, of course, increasingly, the role of the state becomes important in this particular industry, and hence you have to look at politics, unfortunately. It's not that there was no role of the state, the development of TSMC, even the days when Park Chung-hee in South Korea pushing Samsung to make chips also was political in nature. Of course, the role of the state changes, and so on and so forth. Finally, for policy, I think there are 3 points we need to take into consideration. One is that technology, as you can tell, is really what drives this industry. It's really about technology. It's really about how to make this is the Moore's law thing, all right? How to make your chips even more powerful, use less electricity, and hence less power consumption, and hence competitive. Meaning your iPhone doesn't burn your ear. Because if the chip is too hot, use too much power, your ear will burn, if you get what I mean. So that's the key driver. And of course, with AI, you want the chip to be even more capable in computing. Second is that as we have found out, small events can lead to significant shutdown in chip production. Years ago, there was, if you remember, the tsunami in South Asia that all the way impacted on Japan and hence shutdown of some of the auto chip making in Japan that led to all kinds of Japanese auto factories shut down in Thailand, in everywhere because of the shortage of those chips. Yeah. And so on and so forth. And of course, there are other more recent examples. Renesas, Japan's chip maker fire in Japan. Samsung last 2 years ago due to, I think, weather, snow, and so on in Texas. Again, fabs will have to be shut down, which lead to, again, disruption in if you like, supply chain. So network resilience is a big issue at stake. Now, however, remember this, okay? Everybody wants resilience. I mean, who doesn't, right? Have you heard anybody who go against resilience? But have they provided you the money to do resilience? Resilience means second source, third source. If you don't buy just from the best, you're bound to spend more money. Resilience is not cheap. You need to put more because you're not using only the most efficient. You're also using the second most efficient, which means not as good, which means either more costly or less good in quality. So resilience comes with a cost. You have to invest more. If you want more resilience, more duplication, yeah, for safety. Third is that I'm afraid when we started doing research on global production network, global production, you never thought politics would be so influential and deeply ingrained now. I mean, this country, of course, I think the days of globalization is not to say over. We are experiencing what's called re-globalization, means essentially kick China out of globalization. So that one is another story we can talk about, but this is a kind of policy issue which is pretty complicated at stake. Yeah. So finally, is to say from an East Asia point of view, what can we do? From an East Asian point of view, I think historically, many East Asian economies have managed to kind of plug into or couple with global production networks by developing what we call niches. specific niches. So TSMC is a niche company. Yeah, essentially specializes in chip making, but not chip design. Never compete with your customer, kind of thing. But equally, you have Samsung that emerged from not doing any memory chips. Was by the way, do you know Samsung's first chip technology came from who? TSMC from the Philips, the Netherlands. Samsung came from Micron, right? Samsung's first chip was from Micron, America. All right, Micron was in financial difficulty and then licensed the technology to Samsung. Today, I don't have to tell you which is the market leader, and so on and so forth. So it is a good example of a strategic coupling at work. But of course, it also means that because you focus on niches, you can't do the whole thing by yourself. In semicon, well, I have Chinese study, I have Taiwan studies here, so I got to be careful. No economy, I won't use the C word, no economy is able to have the entire production network in your economy, okay? Why? Because it's just not possible. Semicon is not possible. No one nation or economy can have the entire production network, all right? And finally is to say, I think the kind of reduction in dependency on China is obvious. I think everybody wants that. Question is then, of course, you will have to spend quite a lot of effort and costs to reconfigure your production networks. Going Vietnam, is that good? Yeah, maybe, but it costs a lot more. Can your buyers, customers take it? And of course, as you can tell, a lot of what I'm trying to say is to do with both firm level production networks and how, if you like, localized or regionalized ecosystems make a difference in this kind of industry. So finally, just to say thank you very much for hosting this talk, and let's chat about it. Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, I'll open it up to the floor. Any questions for Professor Yeung? Kamling.
Henry, this is very interesting and learn about the complexity of that. Thank you very much. Since we are doing the Taiwan study here, I guess I will raise the question: how do you see Taiwan's role in all these, and its vulnerability and importance, and so on and so forth? We can't get into this sort of thing. You can elaborate at least your personal views on this subject, given that I think the Taiwan question is actually on the front page of many papers today. Because all the vulnerability and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Do I need to repeat the question, Tim, or was that captured? Repeat the question. Okay. Kami's question is about what about Taiwan? Is put it shortly. The Taiwan question is on the front pages in the headlines.
Now, of course, it's not for me to say what will happen to Taiwan, but I think I would just comment on, if you like, Taiwan's role in the global semiconductor industry. Okay, first is to say Taiwan's dominance in advanced chip making will at least stay for the next easily this entire decade. Intel is trying to catch up, but it will take a while. So this entire 2020s is the world of TSMC, not UMC. Only one company. Taiwan has many semicon firms. I've gone to interview UMC, I've gone to interview Winbond, I've gone to interview so many. Only TSMC is really at the leading edge. Yeah. So the moral of the story is, and that's why TSMC is Taisan, right? It's like the silicon shield protecting Taiwan. So, and hence, if you go into technical detail, will the best of TSMC's technology be relocated elsewhere? No chance. The best fabs are always at home, including Intel. It's normal. Samsung's best fabs are going to be in Korea. Yeah. So I think Taiwan's role in global semicon will continue to be extremely important. But this is also tied to, from a GPM point of view, the very fact that Taiwan is extremely dominant in the making of smartphone, laptops, yeah, and so on and so forth. So it's entirely conceivable that it will be strong, yeah, despite the vulnerability. Yeah.
So would that help protect Taiwan, or that's actually put it even more difficult position given the strategic role?
Yeah, I mean, that one is difficult for me to say, because I think there's more international relations people. But I think even as of yesterday, Nikkei Asia was saying that both ASML and TSMC actually have what's called a kill button. I mean, if the fabs are taken over by, say, China, they can remotely shut it down. All right. Basically, you have to understand a factory is like a kitchen. All right. Just because you take over the kitchen, you don't have the staff operating it, it's no use. You can have the same wok, right? But how come your, what was it, the dim sum, char siu bao is never as good as his? Because he steam in exactly, I don't know how many seconds, the fire control is not the same. Hi. Of course, if you make a 40 nano chips, that one is different. Anybody can make. 4 nano, 3 nano is very difficult.
At lunch, we were complaining about, I was complaining about the quality of the char siu bao in Seattle.
So, yeah, David.
David.
I have two questions.
Hi. Yep, sure.
One is the role of finance.
Mm.
So you mentioned resilience.
Yep.
And it strikes me financialization, at least in the U.S. markets, which is driven financialization,
Yep.
really works against resilience.
Mm.
Developing second and third contracts.
Yep.
Is resilience likely to be a long-term kind of policy for anyone? The second question is one that I've always wondered about. So what difference does it make if it's a 2 nanometer chip or 3 nanometer chip? I mean, as I've read, so only 5% of the world's chips are below nanometers. So we're told that this is all critical for AI, defense uses, and so on. But how much different is a 5 nanometer chip? What are we arguing over variant applications on it?
So I'll repeat the question. Two questions. The first one is about the role of finance, which seems to work against resilience. The second question is about the difference between these smaller die sizes. So what is the actual difference between a 5, 3, and a 2 nanometer chips? What does allowed to do?
Okay, very different questions, of course, but very, very interesting in their own right. Yeah. So first is to go back to finance, and of course, U.S. and the nature of U.S. capital markets, where financialization really drives everything, including, I'm afraid, university governance and department hiring lines. So it is true that it's much harder for American firms because of the stock market pressure. And of course, the ruthless analysts from the institutional investors to pursue too much of what's called resilience. So they actually will do resilience probably in a more lip service way. Yeah. But eventually, once things calm down by November this year, depending on who comes out, then the Dell, the Apple will just have to be business as usual, and that's why if you look at some recent counting, Apple's number of suppliers in China has increased. So it's not resilient, it's more dependent, mainly because Apple realized that its iPhones are not selling too well in China. China, by the way, is the biggest market for smartphone. America is no longer the biggest market. I'm afraid, folks, you're not the biggest anymore. China is. So because of that, Tim Cook has to figure out a way to stay competitive against the competitors, which is the Huawei, the Xiaomi, the Oppo phones, which actually use very good ingredients. Even though I'm a die-hard Apple user, because I study everything that goes into this, I actually know the Xiaomi phone is better. They use better cameras. It's Leica camera. This one, I'm afraid, is not Leica, okay? But what to do? I have sold my soul to Steve Jobs, not Tim Cook. So if you get my point, American firms, very difficult, because if you pursue resilience in a big way, I'm afraid you can't even see the outcome of that strategy because you will be fired. Yeah, because you're bought subject to the share prices pressure. I'm not entirely happy. Yeah, so this is just the nature of financial market. But whether Asian firms of the like, whether Samsung or Lenovo or Xiaomi can do it better, hard to tell too, because they are probably less worried about the sort of resilience, like blockage of suppliers. Yeah, I think the idea is that once you go outside certain suppliers, it will take time to upgrade the supplier capability to the level. So, and that's why China has such a huge hole in the electronics industry, because its supply networks are so dense, so capable, both local and foreign firms. Foreign very often is Korean, Taiwanese, yeah, by the way. So in that sense, China is just the territory where many of these activities are located. It's not all Chinese firms. I'll rephrase, mainland Chinese firms. Huh? Second question, a very important one. I mean, at the end of the day, 3 looks like it's only similar to 2. What's the big deal? 3 nano and 2 nano. Well, I mean, partly is marketing, right? I mean, I'm a Mac user. I know if I buy the latest MacBook Pro, you know, the M3 chip is only slightly faster. Huh? But then, of course, to certain users, whether for, you know, vanity reason or for really, I mean, there is performance difference, 10%, 15%. So people are willing to invest in that and buy those equipment. But if you talk about, that's for commercial use. But if you're talking about for defense, I think the whole idea of US restrictions on China in semicon is not for current military application. It's for 10 years down the road when they can send the laser to outer space. Will that laser shoot you guys more accurately, faster than you can block them? And that depends on the processes. And if you block them 2 nano now, maybe you can block the laser in future. I think that's how I would interpret. Nobody can give you definitive answers unless you are the generals in defense yourself. Otherwise, I think that's what some of the so-called industry experts talk about. The whole idea is to prevent China's military technology in 10 years' time. You start now. Because China doesn't have the advanced manufacturing. Taiwan has, Korea has. So why bother to block? It's not like they're threatening commercially either. SMIC is not, I mean, it's at least 3 generations behind TSMC, even though it was founded by TSMC engineers. Right? So you're talking about, yeah, it's a funny. I mean, Huawei, same thing. Yeah. So, but there is a difference. I think the idea, and then you will say, what's the difference between 1.5 nano and 2 nano? 2 nano is 2025 in production. 1.5 is 2027. What's the difference? 10%. Does it worth the money for me as an individual consumer? No. But for certain user, yes. So, and hence that technology has to be developed. Yeah.
Hi. Comment on the China's big fund.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of reports about ways to duplicative efforts, largely about expansion of high-tech zones that didn't yield the kind of outcomes they're looking for.
Yeah.
But they are making slow progress. I wonder if you could just talk, if you can comment on what's happening with respect to China's own investments.
So the question is about China's $150 billion funds. What's going on with it?
Yeah. Okay, of course, I've not tracked every single, if you like, policy loans given out and so on. But I think the overall consensus from what I've read and know of is that even the Chinese government realized the kind of inefficiency that went into many of the subsidies. So I think probably less than 1 year ago, basically the Chinese government is rethinking, re-examining this 150 billion spending, partly because the Chinese government right now is not exactly very rich, because the economy not doing well, property market not doing well, secondary capital market means the small, the off-state bank loans are gigantic. So the government is worried. I mean, 150 is still a lot of money, and so there is quite a lot of wastage in the money easy sought 5 years ago, and then the fab chip building, not so good. So there is a lot of, I was told, because I've gone China 3-4 times now since the last 1 year, talking to different people. It seems that there is quite a bit of reflection on this matter. Yeah. That's how I think that's my sense of the current play. Yeah.
So Huawei did come out, I think, recently with their most advanced chip yet. Is that where do they fit within this?
So the Huawei chip, nobody can tell you definitively whether it is SMIC making for Huawei the 7 nano, or it is Huawei utilizing some equipment of SMIC to make this. But remember, the nanometer you hear, 7 or even 5 nano, refers to the chips that are found in Huawei new phones that have that kind of capability, up to the 5-7 nano capability. How they make the chip can be extremely inefficient. Like your char siu bao steam 5 times. Conway's Kitchen can steam that char siu bao 1 time to perfection. You 5 times. You know how much more fuel you have to use to steam the char siu bao 5 times? And the char siu bao, yes, it's edible up to 5 nano. But you know, will we buy the same char siu bao? No, it costs 5 times more. Why don't I buy from him? So that's why you see, you can hear all this 7 nano, 5 nano, sure, but not until you see the actual cost of making it. Okay, it goes like this. You don't have that UV machine, you can use the earlier generation machine. Remember, it's just like photocopying, right? You want to photocopy this, the UV machine, 1 copy, very sharp, accurate. You see the font, you see exactly the pineapple. This is very cute. I stay in University Inn, owned by Stay Pineapple. You can see the pineapple very sharp. But you don't have this very sharp machine. You can use a not sharp machine. Sure, you photocopy 5 times. And hopefully you get the image more or less the same. That's what the Huawei chips are made. Yeah, using the DUV machine, the previous generation, and just have to do more rounds of lithography. Yeah, means again photocopy. Yeah, but it's not economically efficient. It's not sellable. No external party will buy from them. Right. So, I mean, this is the state of play.
And that's why I drive 2 hours to Vancouver for my Sao
Benson.
I'm curious, what does global value chain
Hi.
government theory have to tell us about government's implementation of industrial policy? Because you had all 6 of those economies on there and their various industrial policies.
Yeah.
But at least in my research on how Taiwan engages with companies, the Taiwanese government engages with companies like Google, Signal, and OpenAI, is that it's much more of that relational model.
Yeah.
My understanding of China is to be more of a captive or integrated firm model, depending on if it's a private or a state-owned or state-controlled firm. How are the industry executives and industry players you're talking to viewing this? These other governments' attempts to engage in industrial policy? Are they, is it relational? Do they feel captive? Or is there, like, am I applying global value chain governance theory in an inaccurate way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let
me repeat the question. It's a good question from Benton. What does global value chain theory tell us about government implementation of industrial policy? For example, how are industry executives viewing other governments' efforts? Do they see it as captive, relational, something else?
Yeah. Right. So again, going back to the original 2005 paper, it was meant to talk about how the chain itself get governed, and the role of the state is not part of the GVC, if you like, original formulation, mainly because of this. The state, remember, with some exception like Singapore, doesn't produce the economy. It's the firms that actually produce the economy. Right, government can induce firms. I say with the exception of Singapore, because even Singapore Airlines is more than 51% owned by the state. You know, we have lots of state-owned enterprises in Singapore. So in that sense, I say even Singapore government actually produce the economy. Yeah? But in general, no. In most countries, economies on earth, it's the private firms that produce the economy. And hence, GVC is about industrial organization, and hence it's by definition looking at firms. The role of the state can be important as kind of really, in a positive sense, supportive, perhaps stimulating agent, but not as the one doing GVC. It would be very unusual because it's not the government's business to do value chain. It's the government's business to help either support or kind of steer GVCs in different industries towards certain direction. On that basis, then the characteristics of very relational captive may be harder to apply to state-firm relations. State-firm relations are different animals, also, of course, also very much changeable because depending on time period, right? I mean, Samsung used to be, of course, very captive relationship with the state, Park Chung-hee days. Today, no president of Korea can tell Samsung what to do. They own only 25% of the entire economy of South Korea. 25%. Don't believe? Check it out. TSMC is also not very small. It's Taiwan's biggest company. Use up only Taiwan 10% of the electricity, 10% of Taiwan's water. Arizona fabs, do you have so much water? No. So it's hard for the state to tell firms what to do. The firms will, yes, listen to government, play some lip service, get the incentive, and still do what they do because the government cannot do this thing. Yeah. So it's in that sense that I think here you're referring to political economy. Huh? Hi. So this will be a different, there are different sort of understanding of this in polyscience and so on. Then I think that we need to analyze it from that perspective. Right? Not doing the GVC governance idea, I think doesn't work for understanding. But if you're looking at, say, Google's relationship with say, Samsung, then it works. Who has more power? Yeah, because they are related parties through Android and so on and so forth. Yeah, in my 2022 book, I have a small story that actually the Android guy first went to Samsung, and Samsung didn't buy it. And then Google bought it. Today, I don't have to tell you who benefit more from Android, the operating system. So.
We have a few more questions, and also one from online. Maybe let's do Claire, Fu Ren, Bill, and then I'll take the online question.
My question is about AI.
Okay.
So I could be wrong, but I'm under the impression that TSMC is the only company that's capable of making the most advanced GPU chips. So given the importance of the AI revolution and the potential political instability in that region, do you think the need for resilience will induce some change to the global value chain?
Yeah.
I'll repeat the question. So Claire asks, TSMC is the only company capable of producing the most advanced GPU chips, which are used in AI applications. Do you think that the need for resilience might change this global supply chain?
Yeah. The short answer is yes. Samsung Foundry is very close. Both are capable of 3 nano at the moment. It's not 100% sure. Okay, let me put it this way. Every advanced chip can only be outsourced to one company. You cannot say, okay, the same chip, I want TSMC, but I also want Samsung Foundry or Intel Foundry Services to make. Why? Because then they have to, each of them will have to have a team of engineers who have to customize their fab just for you. 3 times the cost. That's why every chip, once designed, can only, because the design period already worked very closely with the actual fab chosen, and hence it can only be done by one fab. The next chip NVIDIA make can be done by Samsung, for the same argument. Yeah. So this is just to give you the specificity first. With that in mind, you cannot have 2 suppliers for the same chip. You can have 2 suppliers for different generations of chips. Possible. But how effective? Not clear. But currently, in terms of run, only Samsung and is closer to TSMC and Intel Foundry Services. Depending on whether Intel can carry through the tens of billions of investments, then it may catch up. Yeah. So in that sense, you may have multiple suppliers, not for the same chip, but multiple chips. Yeah, for the most advanced AI chips. Yeah? And also depends on whether, let's say, AMD's GPUs want to be made by the same guys who make for, say, NVIDIA GPU. So that again, add another layer, inter-firm competition. Yeah. So that's why this industry is both ways. It's not just looking at the kitchen side, but also look at the chefs, because the chef have to look at their customers, their customer base. Yeah. And whether they want to use the same central kitchen is another interesting commercial decision. Yeah.
All right. Next was Fu Ren, and then Bill after that.
Thank you for the sharing. I came from Taiwan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can see that kind of expansion of in Hsinchu or Tainan.
Yeah.
This kind of built in Arizona, and actually just most some actually mentioned about this kind of issue because it already have a factory in Poland 3 years ago, but the cost is so high. And right now the company actually built a farm in factory in Arizona. But when they start to build the factory in Arizona, actually they build the same type of factory in Japan.
Yeah.
Japan start to produce now.
Yeah.
So you can see the kind of time difference between the working environment in the US and versus in Japan and Taiwan. So come with about this kind of production network.
Mm.
Not just about who can buy the equipment, about the where you can recruit the right employee, engineer, like a shift. So in terms of this kind of issue, I just wonder if we get this kind of understanding from this kind of global network.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to replicate this kind of production environment. Okay, from one culture to the other culture, from that region have different mindset and different training background, or those kind of different management style. And take this kind of understanding, then think about China. Right now, it's isolated by the global, chip production network, for example. But China, they have a very good learning ability, given this kind of culture. So I just wonder, when we talk about production, global production network, what's the impact of the culture, knowledge, influence of this kind of emerging shape of the production network, such as the Apple to India. Any kind of insight can give us some kind of.
So the question is, given the context of the expansion of fabrication to globally, to Japan, to Arizona, to Europe, we know that it's difficult to replicate the particular environments with particular mindsets, training, management styles, particular to Taiwan. China maybe has a good ability to learn. What is the impact of culture and knowledge?
Yeah, very good question. And I think also the initial statements you made are exactly spot on the immense challenges of replicating, in this case, semiconductor manufacturing in different parts of the world. So let me start with anecdote. Okay, the exact wording may be slightly modified, and hence parental advice may be needed. However, when Maurice Chang came to Arizona, and then I think Joe Biden asked him, what's so difficult to move your fab here? So Maurice Chang said, I'm very for feminist geography, okay, but this statement, because it came from Maurice Chang, is very gendered, okay, so be prepared. Warning given. Maurice Chang said, well, in Hsinchu, if the phone rings at 3 a.m. in the morning, the wife will shake the husband and say, hubby, the fab needs you, please go back. Wow, this is very gendered, right? Assuming the engineer has to be a man. And then he said to Joe Biden that, but in America, the same phone will ring, but the wife will throw away the phone. The engineer will never turn up at the fab to solve the problem, because so it is to do with work culture, but also partly this kind of what we call social relations of production. Right? That Taiwan, Korea, or Taiwanese, Koreans, and hence Chinese in China have also accumulated for a long period of time. Now, however, just because in China, the same, say, wife will pass on the phone, does it mean China can catch up? Oh no, this is just one of the many ingredients. Work culture is one part, a necessary but not sufficient condition. Because if it's on its own sufficient, then we can just hire, I don't know, certain people to work in all the Intel fabs and things may happen. Not necessary. Yeah. So you need also other ingredients. Yeah. In terms of transfer over space, very difficult. Because as you can tell, the main difficulty operating the Arizona fab is that if you move 50 engineers from TSMC, these are the most important engineers who must know how to exactly operate the walk and the fire control. Are they willing to live in Arizona for a long period of time? I mean, when I left the fab, drove about 15 minutes, then I started seeing some residential property being built, I think for some of these engineers. But hey, what about their kids go to school? Phoenix is almost like another 45 minutes. I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult. They can come and help set up, but to ask them to stay forever is a different story. Yeah, because I mean, for them to move from Hsinchu to Tainan, okay, half an hour by high-speed rail. You know what I mean? Very difficult. Yeah, so that's why the same applies to the Koreans, the same in the Samsung fabs. For them to move to Texas, also very difficult. Yeah, this is just the nature of, I mean, those of us, yeah. Thank you, yeah. And Bill, I think has a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
For the variant of
Hey.
this question.
Hey.
But NVIDIA
Hey.
now is the leading edge of accelerated computing and
Yeah.
Of the AI revolution. Seems to be all along out there.
Mm.
Chips are made
Mm.
by TSMC.
Mm.
So doesn't this trend have the effect of making Taiwan more central? While there's some factory or fab being built in Arizona, but for the foreseeable future, it's all TSMC.
So Bill's question is, NVIDIA is leading the edge of the AI revolution. All of their chips, the advanced ones, are made by TSMC. Does this trend have the effect of making Taiwan the center?
Okay, you use NVIDIA, is it because of Jensen Huang, who has Taiwanese connections/background? Well, I mean, then Lisa Su, AMD, also Taiwan.
Jensen has a way over pieces.
So, and then by the way, Broadcom, also a very major fabless firm, CEO is a Malaysian, yeah, Tan Hock, whatever the last word, I can't remember, yeah. So going back to your question, now NVIDIA, to be fair, is an American firm, clear, yeah? Even though CEO, co-founder was Jensen Huang. Whether the AI revolution will materialize the way he envisioned, because currently it's almost like a monopoly, as you know. I mean, one chip is, I think, $250,000, the most advanced one. The cost of it is about only $50K. And why do you think the firm now is worth more than Amazon? Your wonderful Seattle firm. Okay, number one, Apple. Number two is wait, who's number two? Google. That's right. Number three is NVIDIA already. So going back to your question is, I'm not too concerned that so-called Taiwan will. I mean, Taiwan play a central role in AI, yes, but I think there will be some AI chips that may get outsourced to the Arizona fabs. And if Intel can catch up in the next 3 years, then again, there will be some AI chips made by IFS, Intel Foundry Services. Okay. So, but as I said, the exact chip cannot be done by the same two suppliers. So there will always be kind of, I think, some mix and match. And then in terms of commercial use versus military use AI chips, then there'll be a huge difference. Military, by the way, even before the current round, even before Trump became president, there was an exact book written by CXU, but I can't remember the first name, essentially on military chips. There are very peculiar, US defense has very clear, if you like, procurement strategies, and very clear. So even though TSMC, some of the military chips are made by TSMC, there are very specific requirements. So it doesn't spill over to the commercial side of TSMC chip making, because you have to understand military chips is, numerically is very little. I mean, how many missiles you can have? I give you 1 million? No, you don't have. You don't make 1 million missiles, okay? You know how many smartphones per year sold? 1.4 billion. How many more chips needed for commercial? A lot. Military, small player. But military wants very high security, small batch, and hence specific locations. Yeah. So, and of course, some of which will be in secret facilities as well, for obvious reason. Yeah. So, and hence, for the commercial side, NVIDIA AI chips, I mean, if they screw up, they have a supply crunch, I'm sure Lisa Su will be very happy. Or AMD stock owners will be very happy. Just like, Tesla screw up now. Those of you who own the competitor share, you'll be very happy. This is capitalism. True. So in that sense, I'm not too worried. So yeah.
Our last question will come from online. We're a little bit over time, but I hope it's okay.
No
keep you for
problem. I'm easy.
another couple of minutes. This is from Professor Galing Sao, who says that your conclusion at the end of the talk, nationalization of production networks won't solve shortage, seems to be going against what the Biden administration wants to do. So if you were an advisor to Joe Biden, what would you say to his America-centric policy?
Of course, what I will say is that, which I kind of make it more explicit if you have time, go to YouTube and find our Hashcard owning conference, because it was very policy oriented. So I made some of the remarks on this kind of matter, kind of reshoring, localization of production, that you can reshore economic activities. Of course you can. It's a matter of cost. At the end of the day, it's all about how much you are willing to pay and who is going to pay for it, right? So whether it's the state or then the users or a mix of both. The moral of the story is, I will ask a simple question, right? Are you sure you want this back? If you really want it, then are you sure you know the true cost of this? If you say yes to both, then why not? It's your political future, not mine. You know? So it's in that sense, I think some of the reshoring initiatives are important. I understand for whether national security or for resilience purposes, but you have to bear in mind that it's not cheap. So the TSMC fab in Arizona is meant to be at least 30% more expensive, at least, than in Taiwan. Yeah. So that means whoever the buyers, I mean, even though yes, Apple has publicly announced it has signed up for the capacity, NVIDIA, these are all show of face, but I'm sure they don't give the most advanced chips to the Arizona fab for obvious reason, because then it's 30% more expensive, means cut into their profit margin 30%. Does any of you want to have a 30% pay cut? No, I don't want. 30% increase pay? I do. So if you get what I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, it is capitalism that prevails, you know. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Professor Yeung. Let us give us another round of applause.
Thank you.